and today I have a fun video. But first off, happy Halloween. I love this holiday. I always look forward to it. I'm super excited to be celebrating it this year. I'm just going to be doing something chill. I'm not hitting up any cool parties or anything like that. I decided I'd rather spend it with my family this year, so I'm going to go on a little bit of a road trip, and we're going to carve pumpkins and watch scary movies and just spend the evening together. So I'm excited. But happy Halloween. I hope you have an amazing one. Let's just jump right into it. Hopefully you like it. Don't want to scare anybody. If you are not a fan of this kind of stuff or it gives you the heebie-jeebies, maybe check another video out. But for those of you who are interested in hearing a real horror story, stay tuned because we got a good one for you. When I was in high school, it was my senior year prom. And there was a girl that I was really interested in asking to this dance. We'll call her Allie. I had interest in Allie for a while, and I was really excited that prom was coming up because it gave me an excuse to ask her on a date. I asked this girl to prom with me, and I had a group of buddies who were all planning on going on a group date together before the dance. I have a really fun group of friends, or had a really fun group of friends in high school, and we like to do adventurous things like climb and hike and swim, and we made a lot of fun memories doing stuff like that. And we decided that for our group date that we would go on a hike. Now, the place we decided to hike is actually a really cool location. It's located in Provo Canyon, and at the top of the hike, which is a few miles, really steep climbing, it's the kind of hike where you have to grab onto chains that somebody has embedded within the rocks, and you pull yourself up. At the top of that hike, however, there was a restaurant that at one point had a cable car that would take people from the bottom of the canyon up to the top where the restaurant is. And due to natural disasters, it became unsafe to have a restaurant at the top of this canyon. So they cut the cable line, and there no longer is any access to this restaurant that's been abandoned unless you're willing to climb and hike. So my buddies and I, we were used to this kind of stuff, and we'd been outdoor and we'd climbed enough and been on enough hikes that this was nothing new to us, but it was a pretty difficult hike. So we decided we'd ask our dates to hike to the top of this restaurant, and once at the top, we would pull out snacks and food and set up hammocks and watch the sunset and eat food and just have a good time hanging out as a group. And it was a really good plan, we all thought. It was a good plan until the day that it was time to hike, because my buddies didn't do the best job at informing their dates as to how difficult this hike was. And so they came wearing flip-flops, slip-on Vans, short shorts, and they didn't bring any gear or any water. And so I was glad that I thought ahead and asked my date to bring hiking boots and a backpack with water and any snacks and anything that she might need, because I told her it's not the easiest of hikes. Apparently my friends weren't as good at informing their dates, so they showed up very unprepared for the hike that we were about to take, for the hike that was about to take place. So we got there with our dates, and there were about 6 couples, and we began the hike, and it was difficult from the very beginning. People were slipping and sliding. There were some girls that just did not feel comfortable, and they moved at a very slow pace, and I really felt bad for them. And had they known what kind of a date this was going to be, some of them might have said no, or at least they would have brought a little bit better gear. And so my heart really went out to them, and I did what I could to help and make it a bearable situation. But you could kind of tell almost from the beginning that they weren't totally enjoying it. My date and I, on the other hand, were having a great time. We were leading the pack. We had everything we needed, and we were well supplied, and we were just having a good time. And at one point, as we were climbing up this mountain and gripping on the chains, one of the girls, her hands slipped while she was pulling herself up one of the chains. And she fell, and she rolled, and she rolled, and she slid. And there was gravel, and there were rocks, and there was a cloud of dust. And we couldn't do anything. We held on and watched it happen, because it's not like we can just let go and stop her from falling. So I turned around and saw this happen, and I was horrified at what I'd just seen. And she kind of sat at the bottom of the chain, and she was scratched up and scraped, bruised. Thank goodness, not insanely injured or hurt. But we all were horrified and scared, and we all rushed down to the bottom, went to her aid, and she was very tough. She was like, yeah, this was kind of painful, but I think I'm good to go. Like, I think we can keep going along. And at that point, my buddy made the decision, the one who asked her on a date, that, if she's feeling okay, it's probably appropriate to continue on this hike, which was probably not the best idea. That being said, we were high school students, and of course, our brains weren't developed, and we made dumb decisions. So we continued the hike, and we were at this point going at a very, very slow pace. Eventually I was getting cautious of the time. We got to the canyon hike at about 5 o'clock, and the sun set around 10, a little earlier than that, around 9 or 10. And hiking up this was difficult. Hiking down in the dark, I realized, would be a lot more difficult. I brought flashlights. I had headlamps, just in case. For my date and I didn't think to plan for everyone else, so I felt like I was covered, but I knew that it was going to take the group a long time to get to the bottom of this hike. After what felt like hours, and after blood, sweat, and tears had been spilled, we finally made it to the top of this hike. I unpacked the hammock that I'd brought. I had decided that making sandwiches before was probably not a good idea, as they'd be all smushy and hot and gross by the time we made it to the top of the hike. So what I did instead was I bought a box of those frozen Smucker's peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and I just let it thaw as we hiked up to the top. So had some fresh sandwiches. I packed some cosmic brownies. I was feeling really prepared, especially compared to my buddies. And I think one of them had even brought a Subway sandwich for him and his date to share. And it looked horrible. It looked like it'd been run over by a truck, and it was soggy and disgusting. And she took one look at it, and I think all the respect that she had for my buddy just went down the toilet. It was kind of funny, but it was also pretty sad. So anyways, I was having a great time with my date, and I talked. We got to know each other really well. We sat in the hammock, watched the sunset, and eventually I decided it would probably be a good idea to get back down to the bottom of this mountain, because it took so long getting up in the light, and getting back down in the dark would be twice as difficult. So I packed my stuff up. I had everything in my bag. I grabbed my date's hand and we began walking back down the hike. All my buddies were still tired and exhausted and recovering from the hike up with their dates, so we kind of just left them behind. It is important to note, my date had very strict parents, and they were very stern, and I had promised them that I would have her home by 11 o'clock. So that was what was on my mind, was getting her home on time, because I didn't want to get killed by her parents. So even if that meant abandoning my group, I was willing to do it. So anyways, it started to get dark, and it got dark really fast. We started making our way down and feeling our way down the chains and slowly lowering ourselves down. It was slippery, it was difficult, and it was rocky and gravelly. And it's also important to note that this hike follows a waterfall, and so it can get really slippery, and the rocks get that fungus that grows, or the moss that grows, that just makes it difficult to get your traction. So we began lowering ourselves down slowly but surely until it was pretty much dark. The sun had gone down. At this point, I pulled out a headlamp and I gave one to my date, and I turned mine on, and we kept making our way down. Pretty soon, I heard a noise, kind of a shouting. There was some kind of difficult conflict going on nearby, and people were talking loudly. I looked further up the trail, up the chains, higher up on the canyon, and I saw my friend group, and they were struggling. Everyone was taking a very long time, and a few of them were frustrated and getting angry, and lots of them are scared because it was getting dark and it was hard to see. So I looked up at them and felt sympathy for my buddies and for their dates. But the only thing on my mind really was just getting my date home. Strangely enough, as we continued to make our way down, we eventually saw a spotlight shining from the very bottom of the canyon. And it first shone up on my buddies, but then it slowly lowered and directed onto my date and I as we made our way down the canyon hike. I was really confused, and it was weird because it was a very bright light, and it was strange. It was very bright, and I was also just confused. I was like, what's going on? Are these just some random people showing up? They think that they're helping by blinding us with this light. I didn't understand it. And then, after a while, the light that was directed on us moved back up to my group of friends who were clearly struggling and needed the assistance, and definitely drew the attention away from us. So we continued making our way down the hike with our spotlights with our headlamps to guide us. After a few minutes longer of this spotlight shining up on my group of friends, I could see that there were also police lights shining. And I connected in my head that this was a policeman that was spotlighting us. And I was confused. I'd wondered if one of my buddies maybe had called the police because they were scared to get their dates down this hike, or maybe someone had gotten injured. And that's why they knew we were there, and that's why they were spotlighting us, but I wasn't sure. I thought it was kind of strange, and where we were didn't have service either, unless someone had like a carrier that somehow had coverage in that area. So I was confused, but there was a policeman that was spotlighting us as we made our way down this hike. After a few minutes, the policeman turned his spotlight off. He crawled back into the cruiser and he turned around and drove off. And that was really confusing too. I wasn't sure. And at that point in my head I was thinking maybe he's not looking for us. Maybe there's another reason he's out here. Maybe he's looking for someone else. And that was a little concerning, but I didn't really think much of it. Like I said, the only thing on my mind was getting my date home. So after lots of effort was expended and energy, we slowly were able to make it to the very bottom of the hike. And it's important to note, even though that we were at the bottom of the hike, there was still about a half a mile walk to the parking lot where our cars were. And so once we made it to the bottom, we began our way back towards the parking lot. And in this area, the little walkway that we were making our way down was covered with trees, big ones that would completely cover the sky, and it was like a canopy over our heads. And so it was a dark night anyways, but as we walked under the trees that were blocking the moonlight, it got nearly pitch black. It was really dark, really ominous, and I already was a little bit on edge just because there was a policeman there and he was looking for something. So my date and I, we continued making our way down this path until I looked up and I saw towards the entrance of the path a figure kind of walking in our direction, but he was walking very slowly. And this is kind of strange at this point because it's getting late, it's dark, and in the canyon there aren't too many people out at this time. In fact, I was shocked to see someone. It's very uncommon to be out this late in this area of the canyon, so I was a little concerned. I knew that the only way out of here was to get to my car though, so we approached the figure and I grabbed my date's arm and put her to the side, and I very cautiously proceeded forward. I didn't know if this guy was up to no good or what he was doing, but they were heading towards us and we were heading towards him. As we walked closer and closer, I saw that he had something that was weighing his arm down, so to the point where it almost looked like he was walking with a limp. His right arm was being weighed down by something. He was carrying something in that arm, and in his other hand, his left hand, he was holding a phone, and it was shining up into his face, but it was impossible to see any features of his face because he had a hood on as well. And at this point it was really kind of strange because it wasn't cold, and I just remembered being shocked that somebody was wearing a hood in the weather that we had. So as we walked and we got closer to this guy, pretty soon he looked up from his phone. I still couldn't see his face, but I knew that he saw us, and he stopped right in his tracks. He froze in place, and he stared, and he didn't move, didn't shift, kept his eyes trained right on us. And my blood went cold. It was just a strange reaction. And so he was holding something really, really heavy in his other arm, but he'd stopped, and he was staring right at us. And at this point, my fight or flight's kind of kicking in because it's dark, it's late. There's this stranger wearing a hood, holding something that could maybe be a weapon. The police had been there, and all these theories are developing in my head that are putting me in a state of mind that makes me feel like I'm in danger. So I kind of grab my date, as we start speeding up, and we see this guy. And he begins to walk. And at this time, he's keeping his head trained on us. And he's walking slow, but he's walking as if he has a point to where he's going now. And it's clear that his pace has picked up a little bit, and so that freaks me out. Eventually, it's almost like we're at a jogging pace. my date and I. And we get to the point where he is standing just a few feet in front of us on the trail. I think I may have said something along the lines of good night or something, or hey, good evening, and there was no reply, just a stare. I grabbed my date and we kind of dodged around him really quickly and abruptly, and he didn't even flinch. He just kind of stood there, and we started walking briskly past him. And as we walked past him, he slowly just turned his body in the direction that we were going. And it was a very menacing kind of feeling. I could tell something was wrong. I could tell something was off about this guy. But as we passed him, I tried to make sense of what he was holding in his hand. And I kid you not, this guy was holding a hatchet. I could see the blade well enough from the proximity I was in. He was literally holding a hatchet and had his arm weighed down. And at this point, I was horrified. I grabbed my date and pretty much threw her in front of me, and we started sprinting. I said, go, 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 go. Just run, run. And we started sprinting. I'm getting the chills right now just telling you the story. It was scary. It was really scary. I'd never experienced something like that before. But we start sprinting, and we run, and we run, and we run. And I turned back to see what was going on, and he slowly started making his way in our direction. And it started off as a walk, but then he started to speed up himself, and I still couldn't see his face. He'd put his phone away at this point, and he started running, chasing us. We were going full speed down this scary trail, and I flew. Like I didn't even touch the ground. That's how fast I was going. And I had my date in front of me, and we finally, after what felt like miles, made it to my car. I opened the door for her, pushed her in the car, jumped in, locked the doors, turned my car on, shined the lights at the trailhead, and he didn't follow. At some point he'd stopped, but I wasn't willing to sit there and see where he was, so I turned the car on, I spun around, and I flew. I got out of there as fast as possible, and I was horrified. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I should call the police. I didn't know. He seemed very threatening. They'd been there, and so I was shocked and I was worried. But like I said, I was just happy my date was safe and that we'd made it out of that. So I drove home, dropped her off, got her home on time, I might add. But I immediately called my friends on the drive home, and I was like, guys. They didn't answer though, because there was no service in the canyon. And so now I was worried that they were going to be in trouble, that they were going to run into this sketchy dude who was holding a hatchet and walking down this abandoned dark trail at night. Thank goodness that didn't happen though. I don't know what happened to Sketchy Man, but my buddies the next day, they were in some serious trouble. It turns out there had been 2 police calls. The first call was one of the mothers of the dates that we had taken on this hike, and she was really concerned because her date hadn't talked to her or let her know where she was going, and it was getting dark, and so she was scared, and so she called the police and said that she knew that we were going up the canyon somewhere. That was one of the calls made. The other one was just a report of a suspicious character, and I assume that's the man that we ran into. But my friends, they got in some pretty big trouble. Technically, getting to that restaurant is illegal, and so they got in some trouble. And their date's parents, they laid into him and ripped him to pieces, especially the one who had been injured. Her parents pretty much murdered my friend on the spot, verbally, of course. But they were able to work something out with the police, or the police let him off because we were just a bunch of dumb kids and we hadn't caused any damage or anything wrong. So, I don't know. Ended up being like just the most wild date and one of the scariest things that's ever happened. And to this day, when I tell that story, I get the chills. Just for those of you who are wondering, the dance was great. I had a good time. My date had a good time. But man, it was a wild ride. So, anyways, we survived the crazy Axeman in the canyon, and I got my date home on time. And so the story ends well. But I still, every time we drive through that canyon, I still kind of get the chills, and it freaks me out. So, anyways, that is the end of my horror story. Hopefully you enjoyed it. It's kind of freaky, and it's also strange telling it to a camera rather than telling it to a person, but hope you found it interesting, maybe even relaxing. I don't know how you could find something like